Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Books and Cocktails. You see, I upgraded my furniture a little, so I already blasted all my YouTube earnings of roughly 18 cents on a new furniture, but it's a bit more comfy than the previous one. So today's book is kind of the opposite of the first book I was presenting, so it's more about a relaxed attitude to life, but more about that after the cocktail. As today's book is partly about pickles, I was looking for a cocktail which involves pickles, and there's one which is called Gin and Onion, which surprisingly enough consists of gin and onions. So it's also a very complicated recipe. Just take one of these pickled onions and a little bit of the pickle juice, and then you fill it up with gin. So obviously a cocktail for people who like gin. Okay, that's the cocktail, gin and onion. Let's see how it tastes. Cheers. Today I'd like to talk to you about Cooked, A History of Transformation by Michael Pollan, or the German title Kochen, eine Naturgeschichte der Transformation. The German edition is published at Kunstmann. The English edition is published by Penguin Press, New York. Michael Pollan is a professor for journalism in Berkeley. He's writing for the New York Times and is also the author of 6 other books on cooking and gardening and food. The gin is pretty strong there. Time magazine considered him one of the 100 most influential persons in 2010. Which is pretty good for just writing 6 books. It's really a strong cocktail. In the foreword, Pollan motivates the book with the fact that in the last few decades, food became more and more pre-processed, and that people tend to think that eating pre-processed food saves them time. Funnily enough, this time they save, they spend then in front of the TV watching cooking shows. So they watch other people prepare food, which is kind of a strange way. So the book is split into 4 parts, which are labeled with the classical 4 elements of nature from the Greeks. So it starts with fire, then water, air, and earth. Each part of the book covers one technique to prepare food. So the first part stands for barbecue, fire. He starts with the example of a real American barbecue from North Carolina, where you just grill a whole pig. And he describes in this chapter the mythological connections of cooking and the ethnological origins of preparing food. So he goes back to the Stone Age and to history to show how cooking evolved. What he mentions is one important point is the only real difference between humans and animals is cooking. And he explains that heating up food is allowing humans to gain more energy from the food. So processing the food, you spend less energy on the digestion of raw food and therefore can get more energy out of the food and use that energy to evolve bigger brains. The next part, water, covers cooking food in pots. So stewing, and while he's describing the basic cooking process of a stew, he goes on to think about and philosophize about the speed and the perceived ease of pre-processed food. So this perceived ease turns out to be an illusion. The third part, air, stands for the air bubbles in bread. So this part covers the process of baking. And he talks about the experiences of making his own bread, where he got a lot of recipes from the internet, but also traveled around to get all the bakery shops which make good bread. So he's describing the industrial production of bread as well as the manual process. He's describing the obsession of modern world with white flour as opposed to full grain flour, and all the tricks the food industry uses to make food appear healthy, which is a bit of a depressing part. The final part of the book, Earth, covers fermentation, and it's in this part where you notice most clearly that it is an American book. This part where he discusses how cheese is made from raw milk and all the bacteria which are involved in fermenting. It resonates the American, or the sometimes strange American idea and obsessions about hygiene. That, for example, in the US, it's not allowed to eat cheese from raw milk, or only with a lot of gymnastics. So he also mentions the important role bacteria cover in human health. So without these bacteria in our intestines, but which also form part of the fermentation process, humans can develop all kind of illnesses and allergies. So if these bacteria are missing, you have a serious health problem. Pollan manages to cover in his book historical, ethnological, social and economical aspects of eating and cooking, and he's doing a good round trip of everything related to cooking. His book is a very strong appeal to cook for yourself and try out the various techniques which he describes. There's also a section with recipes in the end, so you can go on and try what you have read in that book on your own. As conclusion, just leave the microwave on the shelf and try to cook a stew or bake your own bread. It's a very nice read, this book. It's a very large and veritable source of information, and I would definitely recommend to read it. So, Cooked by Michael Pollan. And it's indeed a very strong gin cocktail. You have to like gin.